Now, I know there's a lot of hesitation, especially on the left, actually a lot of animosity on the left, and even hesitation on the right, politically speaking, when it comes to separating from the Canada pension plan and switching over to an Alberta pension plan. And I think people, they fear change. They certainly fear the unknown, and they're afraid to lose, what they think they put into it already. So I'm hoping that this interview tonight can maybe alleviate some of those concerns, maybe give people a little bit more comfort with the idea of financial autonomy from Ottawa. I guess I'll put it up to both you guys, and you can kind of do the heavy lifting. As I was mentioning to Tanner before we got on, I said I'm not quite illiterate when it comes to this topic, but I'm like kindergarten level understanding. So if you could explain it to me and the audience as if we were 5, because that's really helped my brain wrap around it. But what would be just kind of, we can go to the weeds in a bit, but the broad strokes, what would you say are the main 3 or 5 kind of main differences between an Alberta pension plan and a Canada pension plan as it currently exists?
Sure. You want me to take that one, Nicole?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure, or at least I can start. So it's a good question. The whole question itself is framed quite well. To answer it, we should probably start very quickly by defining what the CPP is, the Canadian Pension Plan is, and how it works. So simply put, the Canadian Pension Plan is a labor pension plan. Actually, the Canadian Pension Plan defines itself as being a social insurance program. And that's probably the most accurate way to describe it. It works like this. You send money to the Canadian Pension Plan every year, and your employer also sends money to the Canadian Pension Plan every year. As a matter of fact, you and your employer send the same amount of money to the Canadian Pension Plan every year. Now, you do that for all of your working years. That is, it might be 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. However long you work is however long you send money to the Canadian Pension Plan. And then when you retire, you're no longer working, and decide to pull your Canadian pension plan, the CPP sends that money, or at least some of that money, back to you. They send that to you every month. That's the way the Canadian pension plan works.
Oh, we still have you there? Oh, we're frozen there. You got his handsome face stuck there in the middle. So, as I said, yeah, guys, we have rural Alberta issues, and it is what it is. But Nicole, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I'll take it until Tanner jumps back on here. I think a lot of fear comes around with the Canadian pension plan versus an Alberta pension plan. And like sort of to elaborate on what Tanner's saying, there's so much unknown. And so we have to know what we are talking about when we're talking about an Alberta pension plan versus a Canadian pension plan. And I think as citizens of Alberta and of Canada, there's a lot of things that we're not necessarily informed about. And so when we need to look at change, I think we have to have the facts for both sides before we can actually pick one and say that this is going to be the most beneficial. So when it comes to a Canadian pension plan, it's what we've known since 1966. It's been out since 1966, and we've not known any different other than the fact that, say, for example, Quebec hasn't been a part of the Canadian pension plan ever. And so there is definitely a province that's showing us that there is a potential that we could absolutely do this. And while we might not want to follow in the footsteps of how they've done their pension plan in Quebec, we could definitely take a step in improving it and doing something that's going to work really well for the benefit of all Albertans, our seniors especially, as well as our up and coming generations. So Tanner, I'll let you jump back on since you're back in the mix.
Oh, am I back? Okay, good. Sorry, I said we're in the middle of a thunderstorm here, and so it might be shoddy, the Wi-Fi. But at any rate, I didn't quite hear everything you said, but nevertheless, I'm sure what you talked about was Alberta's economic advantage that we have, along with the political consequences of a new pension plan. As I was saying before, I cut out. As it stands, we send money to the CPP. Obviously, every province does, except for Quebec, like you mentioned, and our seniors receive money back. But Alberta has a demographic advantage compared to other provinces in the nation. That is, we're younger and we're wealthier, and we work more than other provinces in the nation. All that to say, what it means is we send a lot of money to the CPP. We don't get a lot of it back. We send a lot more money to the CPP than what our seniors receive back. So since the CPP started in the 60s, to now, we have sent a net, when all is said and done, we've sent a net $60 billion plus dollars to the Canadian pension plan. We've sent $60 plus billion more into the CPP than what our seniors have received back. And that's before inflation. So you have to account for inflation, which increases that number. And it's also before accounting for opportunity cost, meaning what could we have done with that 60 billion if we had kept it here? We could have invested it, and we could now be in the hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars that we otherwise don't have. So this demographic advantage alone seems to speak to the need for Alberta to have its own pension plan. Right now, economically, the CPP does not make anywhere near as much sense for Albertans as an APP does. As a matter of fact, there's no contest at all. The advantages that would accrue with an APP economically, let alone politically, and I mean that from a position of autonomy, are vast. They're huge. They're massive. And finally, to your point about people worrying about losing the pension, again, that's a fair worry. It's a fair concern considering the cost of living today. But even in the CPP's Act, in the CPP Act Section 3, it lays out very clearly how a senior cannot lose his or her pension. An upcoming senior can't lose his or her pension. If a province wants to start its own pension plan, as we have the legal right to do, we must provide our citizens with a pension plan that is the same, if not better, than what we have right now. So the worries about losing one's pension or seeing it cut in half or in quarter, whatever it might be, while understandable, need not be concerns just because of the way the legislation is printed.
So I keep hearing, a handful of objections, and I hear the same objections everywhere. And one of those is a fear that they lose what they've already put into the CPC. If we jump ship and do an APP, do people who have already put in, as you said, Tanner, for their entire working lives, do they lose what they've put into it? Is there any way to kind of get a payout of the equal amount or thereabouts of what they've already put into the CPP if we jump ship to an APP?
Right. No, you don't lose it. Right. There is no concern about one losing one's pension or what you've put into the CPP. As it stands right now, it's not as though the CPP provides individuals magnificent returns or juggernaut style or size returns. On the contrary, the average rate of return on an individual's contributions with the CPP, if you're born in, let's say, the 60s or later 50s, because those people are now collecting pension very soon, is about 3.5%-ish. Like, the returns are anemic. They are not the heavy financial juggernauts we've been told that they are. And it's worse for people the younger you are. So I'm expecting a return, again, before inflation and before taxing the pension, which, of course, the pension checks are taxed. I'm expecting a return of 2.5%, which is brutal, right? Think about what I could have done with that money instead. I could have invested it and made a lot more than what the CPP is making for me as an individual right now. But nevertheless, is there a fear that you won't get back what you put into it? That is there a fear that you're not going to get the size of the check that you get right now? And the answer again is no. If you had your own APP, all that would happen is the CPP would take the assets it's accrued from Albertans, along with the liabilities, that is what it owes to Albertans, and just like switching from the right hand to the left, transfer it over to an APP. And the APP would continue to send out the checks. Now, the amounts might increase, of course, as a consequence of our advantages, but nevertheless, the checks would be sent out as they're being sent out right now. There isn't a concern. It's a good question, but no concern.